Well, with Power of the Jedi 2 now in the rear view mirror, Power of the Jedi was the future and current status of Star Wars toy collecting in 1999 through 2002. And it was actually one of the better benchmark moments of modern Star Wars collecting because we got some really awesome deep character selection. I mean, granted, it was only from the classic trilogy in Episode 1 because, Episode 2, 3, 7, 8, and 9 hadn't been created yet. But for the limited, source material, wow, this was a really outstanding lineup. Now, I'm not covering the Episode 1 figures in this video series because I am a classic trilogy purist. Call it what it is. But there were some really nice Episode 1 figures released, and that was because originally this line was supposed to be a continuation of Episode 1. But because Episode 1 didn't sell as well as everyone hoped, well, the Episode 1 continuation for Year 2 and the continuation of Power of the Force 2 were combined into one line, which meant we got a lot of characters that were prepared for these separate lines, so we continued along the course of getting main characters from the original trilogy, with just like the final releases for Power of the Force 2, as well as secondary characters from Episode 1. And since Lucasfilm had dictated that Hasbro now needed to have 50% of their figures be from the classic trilogy, it meant coming up with some creative solutions. Now, we had recently gotten a Han Solo at the very end of Power of the Force 2 in one of the final Comtech waves. And you'll notice that this Han Solo looks very similar to the first Han Solo we got in Power of the Jedi, because, well, this was supposed to be a Power of the Force 2 figure. The Han is very, very similar, even to the fact that his gun, just like that Power of the Force 2 Comtech figure, is much smaller. So a really nice update of what was a vintage figure from back in the day. And I say that because, well, he's got all the colors right, for one. I mean, he's wearing an actual blue jacket, and his gun fits in his holster. The original modern Han Bespin had a black jacket, which to this day, I still don't know why. I mean, there is no reference for him wearing a black jacket in the movie. And every other Bespin Han that was released during the Power of the Force 2 era continued this, whether it was the Mynock Hunt version or the Millennium Minted Coin version, which actually got added deco on the muzzle of Han's blaster for the first time, or the version that came with a cloth jacket with the Princess Leia collection, still black jacket, brown pants, which is not what he wears in the movie. So it was really cool to get a modern Star Wars toy of Han in his Bespin fatigues, wearing the correct colors. And this figure went right up to the top of my list. It was one of my favorites, and still remains so, but I definitely have fond memories of getting this figure because, well, he could do something no one else could, and that was hold his gun out to the side of his head. I mean, not pointing, I guess he could do that pose, but he could do the pose that Han does in Bespin, which is holding the gun straight out in front of him, because this was the very first figure in the modern Star Wars line to have ball-jointed shoulders. It was awesome, and it added a lot of articulation that you just couldn't do otherwise. And as I noted, the accessories were more scaled to what he should actually be holding, both the gun and the binder clips. Now, of course, this wouldn't be the last Bespin Han Solo. We would get many Bespin Han Solos for years to come. At the time, it was kind of felt like figures were one and done, or if we were getting a repeat, it was to correct things. But all the way up through the vintage collection, Han Solo in Bespin continues to ship and continue to be improved upon. Of course, this figure is also special to me because it was one of the two figures on my wedding cake topper. So I'll get to the Princess Leia, who I think was from the commemorative tin collection. But yep, this was the Han that represented, I guess, me on the wedding cake. All right, next up in this wave is another classic trilogy release, and this was one of those quick-to-market solution figures, K-3PO. And if you're saying, well, wait a minute, who the heck is K-3PO? Well, I mean, if you read the card, it says Echo-based protocol droid. And if you don't recognize him from the movie, it's okay because it's definitely one of those blink and you miss him. But he did have quite a few shots, and he appears in more than one shot in the film. He's more or less a Echo-based protocol droid, just like C-3PO, but with white deco and those two red dots. There are others walking around, like R-3PO, which, R, like red 3PO. Not sure what the K stands for, but hey, I'm going to run out and look, they can only do like 26 of these things before they have to come up with new names. I always wondered that. So yeah, you see him in the Echo Base control room, and he both has his clean look that he has before the Imperials attack, and then he has sort of a, well, I guess you could call it a battle-damaged look, where there's a giant grease smear across his front, and his eyes are powered down after, I guess, he's destroyed or shut down or falls down after the Imperials attack. Now, doing repaints of protocol droid is something you see in a lot of different Star Wars lines because, well, once you have the tool for C-3PO or any protocol droid, if you can redeco that in other colors, awesome use of that tool. And this K-3PO not only gave us our very first protocol droid that wasn't C-3PO, but it also gave us the Hoth rangefinder, which was also reused on quite a few Luke and Han figures in the next few years. And oddly, this figure actually got re-released 2 more times, and both times without the battle damage. So you got variants. You got this version on the card had the battle damage, and then we got future ones without it. And it basically opened the door to the easy repaint concept of protocol droids. So this figure was added to the Power of the Jedi lineup in order to fill that Lucasfilm mandate that 50% of Power of the Jedi needed to be from the original trilogy, while the other 50% was from Episode 1. So doing anything that was a quick-to-market solution, taking a C-3PO tool and repainting it white, awesome. All right, continuing along the droid-o-rama is IG-88, one of the notorious bounty hunters from Empire. Now, all of the bounty hunters tend to have a sort of special place in fans' hearts because this was more or less the cantina scene of Empire Strikes Back, the only time when you have, different aliens, different species gathering together. We did get an IG-88 in Power of the Force 2, but it wasn't a single carded release. It came packaged with Boba Fett as part of a Shadows of the Empire 2-pack. So having an IG-88 on a single card in Power of the Jedi actually made a lot of sense, and it felt like Power of the Jedi was sort of filling in the gaps. Figures that really should have had their own card, but the way they were released in Power of the Force 2 didn't get them that, I guess, mountable, wall-hanging, single card option. If you wanted IG-88 up till now, you had to buy him with Boba Fett. But thanks to the wonder of Power of the Jedi, we got not only a single card release, but it was a brand new sculpt. They didn't just take the existing IG-88 and splash new color on him. So that was pretty cool because, well, we like getting single-carded versions. So, while you could get a single-carded Boba Fett, this was the first time in the modern line that IG-88 was offered this way. And, again, it made sense because it gave sort of purpose to Power of the Jedi as a subline. And IG-88 being one of those, popular bounty hunters, robots, droids, Star Wars icons. I mean, his head was just reused from the Cantina drink dispenser, but that's a whole other YouTube video. So, yeah, he's got a lot of history with Star Wars and a lot of history with action figures. And there's a reason that IG-88 shows up over and over and over again because, hey, killer giant robots with guns are part of what makes Star Wars cool. There was even a prototype version of IG-88 released. And then I think the sort of leading up to the climax of the Vintage series release, which probably has, well, it does have more articulation and more accessories. And of course, there's other IG droids that this figure was sort of the basis of, including the one from The Mandalorian, IG-11, and that would happen throughout the line. But hey, for those of us who waited for a single card release with his, trademark single gun, now we had him, and it could put to rest the 2-pack with Boba Fett that had to fill our modern toy collection previously. And speaking of single-carded release in Power of the Jedi, yet another figure that did that was the Scout Trooper. And with this guy, you actually got him in 2 different flavors. You got the battle damage Scout Trooper with the giant little burst there on his tummy and a second burst on his shoulder, and then a clean version. Same sculpt, less deco. But hey, for army building, this was actually really cool. And it was the very first time we ever got a trooper with battle damage that was directly painted on. The previous Stormtrooper required water in order to see the battle damage, but now with this one, well, the battle damage was there. Now, we would continue to get Scout Troopers over and over again throughout the line, and sculpts would improve all the way through the Vintage series release, where we would get more articulation, more deco, and, the accessories would actually fit into his holster, probably culminating sort of in the Saga Collection version, but Then we would also get our Black Series with a better helmet turning, and then I think the ultimate one was this one that came with the speeder bike. This figure, it was the same as that Black Series one, but the belt was attached correctly. All right, so those of us, much like having to be stuck with IG-88 as part of a 2-pack, if we wanted a single release of the Scout Trooper, this was the first time we got it, since the previous Power of the Force 2 version was also only available as a pack-in with a vehicle. So once again, proving kind of the need, or what the reason for being for Power of the Jedi was that we would get more single-carded releases of main characters. And this guy really needed it, because his original Power of the Force 2 release was designed to sit on the speeder bike, which meant he had that kind of wonky stride to his legs that were extra wide. They did have the articulation, but a lot of us just wanted one that could stand around and look cool, and that's what we got. This version couldn't really stride the bike that well, but between the battle damage, deco variant, the gun that fit in the holster, it was a pretty great figure. And importantly, we now had him on a single card to match the rest of our collection.